So here we are, at last, as telling events grow nigh. Eagles are a reclusive caste, each preferring a separate sky. Yet now reluctantly massed. For dire things have grown. Heights we once commanded are by enemies overthrown, while civility demanded by hidden foes now known. Between us much is decided, scales fallen from our eyes, our true men no longer divided, as all now see clearly the lies and laugh at the petty prided. And so I am not here to tell you what you know, and the truth we already bear, nor to make numbers grow. Nature is more gifted, I fear. Awoken by liars and thieves, men slowly make their return, as spring brings forth leaves, and onto winter's brow concern of a fate which destiny weaves. And to those still unconvinced, the enemies, fools, and the weak, these words were not evinced. To such men I no longer speak, for words are no longer minced. It is only for you my words form. Aye, it is only for you, my brother. Only to he whom to truth conform. For why should I talk to another about miracles only we perform? Great friends, ready to aid, yet always without risk or loss. All those who remain unswayed, beauty, wealth, its great cost. All these things soon will fade. And then only a name will last, and a meaning with it that grows. Where was he in our dark past? Was he enriching himself with foes, or flying among the eagle caste? Men who for their people fought, only from these kings descend. Here a love for kin was untaught, thus we ensure this love not end, or a king's love ever bought. Thus do always what you should, consider no longer when, but in all moments rise for good. Be among the heroes of men, be recalled as one who stood.
Our next speaker I'd like to introduce, Ike Baker, is Chief of Operations for the League of the South, a position he has held since shortly after Charlottesville in 2017. Ike lives in the mountains of eastern Kentucky, where he was born and bred. Ike is a business owner in his 50s who, like so many of our Southern men, served the Empire during his youth in the profession of arms. He now and forevermore serves only our people and their interests. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ike Baker.
Morning.
Morning. Morning, sir.
To all my Southern nationalist compatriots in Florida Chapter, League of the South, I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to our guests and our other friends here today. I want to thank you all for having me here. Particularly, I'd like to thank the chairman, Mr. Tubbs, for asking me to be with you at this conference of the Florida League. It's particularly gratifying for me to be asked to speak to you here. The Sunshine State was my home at one time for over 2 decades. Florida is a beautiful state with a great deal of good to be said about it. And my friends, the great free state of Florida will be a worthy crown jewel in a new independent southern nation. A nation freed from servitude under the boot of the federal Leviathan, a nation whose every effort will be strictly for the benefit and welfare of the Southern people, a nation whose future course will be set by the will of the Southern people and only by the will of the Southern people. I'm going to talk with you this morning about the state of Southern nationalism 2 years after Charlottesville. Tomorrow is the 11th. We were there on the 12th. Is that correct, sir? But it was the second Saturday in August, so as the calendar goes, we were there 2 years ago this Saturday morning. The state of Southern nationalism after Charlottesville, where we find ourselves today, and where we go in the future. 2 years ago, on a hot Saturday morning in August of 2017, the League of the South and our allies of the Nationalist Front executed a column left movement out of a public parking garage, and we marched the 3 city blocks up Market Street to Lee Park in Charlottesville, Virginia. The events of that day are well known. I'm not going to review them or rehash that day or the political, demographic, and other factors existing in Charlottesville, and indeed within the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Old Dominion state, and the factors which created the treacherous environment we marched into. The ramifications, specifically to Southern nationalism and generally to white nationalism, which resulted from that day, the ensuing lawfare exerted against us and our erstwhile allies by hordes of adversarial Marxist lawyers, as well as our ever-evolving operational tactics in response to these and other factors, are our topics here today. In the days and weeks immediately following August 12, 2017, the establishment was in a state of profound surprise and utter shock at what we had done there on that hot summer day. The outward unity of action demonstrated by Southern nationalists and by white nationalists of every stripe shook the powers that be to their very core. At that time, they feared us, and they feared what we might do next. Unite the Right did, for a day at least, unite the various factions of the American dissident right in a show of numbers and a unity of purpose which garnered worldwide attention. The President of the United States himself attempted to express an even-handed approach to the events of that day. It was an even-handedness which, while inaccurate, due to the violence of that day being initiated by what the media referred to blithely as the counter-protesters, it still did not serve the Marxist narrative nor meet the scurrilous requirements of the Lugenpresse. That narrative was, and still is, to portray only us who were rightfully there as acting in the wrong, in fact, to portray us merely as toxic, evil racists, simply for assembling lawfully with a valid permit to be present in Lee Park that day. So where are we 2 years later, and what factors have brought us here? Well, my friends, the Nationalist Front no longer exists as a viable organization. Among the other member organizations of the Nationalist Front, internal upheaval, departure of key leaders within the memberships, misconduct and inexplicable actions by their leaders, and other unfortunate events took their toll. Only the League of the South remains as the sole former Nationalist Front member organization remaining with continuity in our internal organization and continuity in our leadership.
Woo, yeah.
That certainly is not to say that changes have not occurred for us. A number of our people realized there were heretofore unrealized family commitments which would require much more of their time and energy, or business obligations which would prevent their continued participation, or their spouses were unhappy with them, and a myriad of other reasons for their departure from us. Summer soldiers will always find a reason to make themselves scarce from the battlefield. This was to have been expected. When the heat is turned up and the kitchen becomes hot, those who cannot stand the heat will quickly find reasons to be elsewhere. The League of the South has adapted and altered our tactics, responding to the ever-shifting social terrain of this modern-day Weimar Republic, which the United States has become. This has led us to adopt forms and methods of activism and other expressions of our viewpoints, which some who were previously with us apparently lacked the stomach for. A Aside from the very successful White Lives Matter rally conducted by the Nationalist Front in Shelbyville, Tennessee a few months later, the days of large-scale, openly announced nationalist rallies very likely ended that day in Virginia, at least for the time being. Tactics, like the terrain, are ever-changing. Therefore, we will always adapt, improvise, and overcome. Throughout 2018 and 2019, we have followed an operational policy of flash rallies. This tactic is based on identifying, both culturally and demographically, southern towns and cities where our natural base, the southern people, lives, works, and pursues their daily lives, and then appearing unannounced in these locations. We have met with rousing success utilizing this tactic in several of our southern states, and the future of League operations will likely continue in this vein. The benefits are numerous, specifically the opportunity to put our message in front of the southern people, completely absent the presence of our Antifa adversaries and the resulting physical destruction and the often massive additional security costs to the law-abiding citizenry. These hallowed places are proof of that. Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Vicksburg, Lookout Mountain, Cold Harbor, Franklin, Kennesaw Mountain, as well as the innumerable Confederate cemeteries where our immortal dead fill heroes' graves. The League of the South stands now, as we have done for 25 years, alone on the bulwarks of Southern nationalism, the sword and shield of our people. We now find ourselves as Southern nationalists decisively in the aftermath of Charlottesville, with all the resulting lawfare continually exerted against us in the courts, the doxing and the demonization by the mainstream media and the popular culture of any white who dares to openly resist our intended demographic replacement, and indeed whoever among us who dares to speak openly against cultural Marxism. These factors have made being a Southern nationalist something far different than what it once was. We're certainly not that heritage-oriented, polite and genteel, passive internet presence some believed that we were and desired for us to forever remain, or the passively benign social club, which some also apparently believed is all that we were. There has arisen a hardline activist orientation, a desire for direct action in our operational posture, and my compatriots, that posture is unlikely to change. We will continue to improve operationally in every conceivable way. Flexibility, innovation, aggressiveness will be our constant goals, and we will never cease striving to become better, smarter, faster, and more creative. Assiduous attention to details, both large and small, will be our watchwords, and we'll continually improve our ability to predict and contain the always present variables, thereby mitigating the risks when we're able to do so. My friends, the time for half measures and questionable commitment to our cause has passed. In the words of one of the many, many great writers our people have produced, quote, "In peace there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger, stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature with hard-favored rage, and lend the eye a terrible aspect," end quote. The diaspora of the Southern people, which has occurred since the days of Reconstruction, has placed many of our folk far outside the historical borders of Dixie. I call upon all sharing our vision and our values to join us. Those who desire a society minimally governed, but governed by our traditional, godly Southern values. Those who desire a society with us each in our traditional, God-given roles as stewards of His creation and our proper traditional gender roles. And those who share our vision for a free, independent Southern nation. If this is you, I ask you to join with us, to stand with us. And when that day of days arrives, to fight alongside us for freedom and independence in this, our ancestral homeland. Particularly, I reach out to those who share our Southern blood and heritage, wherever we may be found, but also to those upstanding folk of traditional values whose desire it is to participate in our resurgence and to become a useful, productive part of what we're striving for. The Southern people are a distinct people, a people worthy in every possible way, as judged by the history of Western civilization, of having a nation of our own. One of the things which makes Southerners a distinct people here on the North American continent. What is it about us and our collective experiences which have created, generally speaking, these bonds of high mutual trust among us and which has welded us into this Volksgemeinschaft, this people's community? We Southerners of today are remnants of the blood and soil nation which our ancestors carved from the very wilderness. Ethnically, we're a distinct people, a people who to a large degree share the Anglo-Celt heritage and the Anglo-Celt DNA, a people with folkways unique to us, a common collective experience and a common collective memory. These factors reside in our hearts and they animate our souls. These are the things which, manifested in our very nature, make us who we are. And friends, we still seethe with rage over what was done to the South and to the Southern people during what our occupiers called Reconstruction.
Amen. Yeah.
In that vein, I'm now going to share something with you, a declaration which I believe is very, very significant. Sorry to continually mop my brow. You know, somebody told me one time that I had an IQ of room temperature, and you know, I think they're right. It's about 150 degrees. All the natural world is based on loyalty to hearth and kin. Yet in the West, historical regard for the integrity of distinct peoples and cultures is being submerged in a multicultural melting pot. It will, if carried to its logical conclusion, overwhelm peoples of European descent. By subverting natural affinities, those in power commit the crime of genocide against Western peoples. It is the natural right of all peoples to seek their own survival and safety. Given the pace at which changes are unfolding, it has become necessary to seek political solutions that would have been hitherto unthinkable. That is the irrevocable separation of threatened peoples from the governing bodies that no longer further their safety and well-being. No distinct people is more threatened than the European-derived peoples who constitute the American South. In 1861, the United States government waged a war of destruction and annihilation against the Southern people. A war provoked in part by abolitionists who agitated ceaselessly for the destruction of Southern whites by military force and armed servile insurrection. This call for their own murder met the only response any sane people could possibly make. The Southern people fought back, surrendering only when the weight of the invader became more than life itself could bear. While the factors influencing the political climate have changed in the intervening century and a half, nevertheless, it is self-evident that Abraham Lincoln's war of aggression against people of his own blood and for the benefit of those of another descent is now being reenacted throughout the West. By such means are a proud and brave people brought to ruin. Indeed, the situation today is far worse because it afflicts all of the West. Nowhere in the civilized world is there sanctuary from the dissolutive multicultural tendencies inflicted in 1865 only on the South. If we are to survive, this spiritual malignancy cannot stand. We, the Southern people, are resolved that whatever the risks to ourselves, we must take those steps necessary to secure the existence of our people and a future for our children. Therefore, and to that end, in the 131st year of our physical and spiritual occupation by the United States government, we, the unreconstructed Southern people, do proclaim the following. That we are a Christian people of Northwest European descent with predominantly Anglo-Celtic institutions, traditions, culture, and heritage, wherever we may abide. We are bound by blood, loyalty, and sentiment to the American South, comprising Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, Missouri, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Virginia. that our historical and cultural identity was forged over a 400-year period of exploration, settlement, and endeavor that created our distinct character, our dialects, our folkways, our values, and our civilization. The war for Southern independence was the crucible that transformed us into a people with a single purpose and a single destiny. That we have an inalienable right to self-determination and to continued existence as a distinct people. These inalienable rights were bought with the courage, tenacity, and sacrifice of our ancestors who fought and died in the War for Southern Independence, the American Revolution, and in every American conflict where duties called back. That the ideals of liberty and sovereignty undergirding America's founding were in large measure given voice by the genius and resolve of Southern statesmen, the transcendent principles they embraced, codified in the Virginia Declaration of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, which have served as an enduring inspiration to all people who aspire to self-government. That no power on earth is morally justified in depriving our people or our posterity of safety, of independence, or of and for the land. Responsible stewardship over nature's bounty has ever been the duty of all Southerners. That we respect traditional social norms defining the role of the family, the relationships between men and women, and the ideals of Southern manhood and Southern womanhood. That we have a long and distinguished martial tradition which precludes soldierly participation by women or by other races. That kindred folk who marry into Southern families and adopt Southern ideals and traditions may become naturalized Southerners. We also welcome kindred folk who, without benefit of family ties, adopt the Southern way of life. Conversely, Southern nativity alone does not confer Southern nationality. That while maintaining the integrity of Southerners as a distinct people and culture, we seek renewed fraternal ties with kindred peoples and friendly relations with all people of goodwill. That we shall never accept the defeat of the Confederacy and the subjugation of our people, nor the eradication of our symbols as the final judgment of history. Nor shall we accept the alien domination of Southern churches and Southern schools, our media, our commerce, our industry, our government, or through these institutions, alien control of Southern life. The defense and preservation of Southern symbols, monuments, relics, and history are sacred charges to every Southerner. In defense of this heritage, no honorable retreat or compromise is possible. But the Confederate battle flag is the banner of the Southern people and stands preeminent as the most powerful symbol of liberty and Southern nationhood in a constellation of venerable Southern symbols. Dixie is the anthem of that nation, and we will stand when it is played and sing it with boldness and pride. But those who love the South are committed to the health and prosperity of its people, the rejuvenation of its culture, the unbiased recording of its history, and the lifting of the occupation and control of the South by non-Southerners. That we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor to the creation of a secure homeland for our people and a future for our children. We shall use all moral means consistent with the right of self-preservation to achieve that end. That true Southerners, like our unreconstructed Confederate ancestors, have an abiding faith in Providence and in the rightness of the Southern cause, and that we do affirm that declaration by adherence to the principles of this declaration. That, my friends, is the New Albany Declaration, signed on the 12th day of October in the year of our Lord 1996 at New Albany, Mississippi. What is described in this declaration is nothing less than our very own furnace of affliction. These events in our history which have refined us into what we have become. My own life is steered by the principles which are promulgated in this declaration. The New Albany Declaration stands alongside the great documents of self-determination found throughout the history of our people. The Magna Carta, the Declaration of Arbroath, the Virginia Declaration of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the resolutions of secession made in 1860 and 1861 by the legislatures of the individual states comprising the Confederate States of America. The New Albany Declaration will take its place among these when the history of our time is written. My friends, I submit to you respectfully that reform of the federal government, that oppressor which has striven openly and mightily since 1861 to crush us, to crush our spirit, and to crush our way of life beneath their boot, is neither possible nor is it desirable to us. The U.S. Constitution, which replaced under somewhat questionable circumstances the Articles of Confederation, grants seemingly unlimited power to the central government and to its unelected federal judiciary, the appointed for life federal judges who routinely subvert the will of the Southern people. This has occurred with consistent regularity for almost 75 years. Virtually every measure taken by Southern legislatures over the past 75 years to preserve our culture, preserve our values, and preserve our way of life has been thwarted by these black-robed autocrats. Very recently, the people of the great state of Alabama, through their legislators, passed a law outlawing abortion in most circumstances. The Alabama governor, Honorable K. Allen Ivey, then duly signed it into law, and lo and behold, an unelected federal judge, exercising the authority conferred upon him by the United States Constitution, declared this duly passed and duly signed law unconstitutional. The United States Constitution cannot and will not save us. Everything which has been done by those people to the South, from the beginning of Reconstruction in 1865 to the ending of the military occupation of the Southland in 1876, and up to this very day, has been done to us under the auspices of the United States Constitution.
That's right.
In 1787, the renowned Virginia statesman and Southern patriot Patrick Henry flatly refused to participate in the Constitutional Convention. In an address to the Virginia Ratifying Assembly in 1788, he referred to the Constitution as, quote, the most fatal plan that could possibly be conceived to enslave a free people, end quote. A careful analysis of that Constitutional Convention and the debates prior to the ultimate ratification of that document shows us that the federal government we have today is the federal government we were intended to have. The vaunted Constitutional Convention held in Philadelphia that summer was held in strict secrecy, behind closed doors, even to the extent that in the heat of summer, the windows were nailed shut. There, 55 men, mostly lawyers, met to address and remedy what they considered a two-week central government under the Articles of Confederation. Though the convention had been called simply to make revisions to the existing Articles of Confederation, some delegates present had much different plans. These delegates were not charged by their respective states to scrap or even to materially alter the Articles of Confederation. Any change or material alteration to those articles required a unanimous vote of the states. This gross disregard for the rights of the individual states caused 16 of the 55 delegates present to not sign the final document, which we know became the U.S. Constitution. Many of those 16 left the convention before its conclusion and returned to their home states in disgust. Thus began the trampling of the rights of individual states to set their courses and govern their affairs as they saw fit to do. And thus began the all-powerful central government under whose boot we travail to this very day. The U.S. government is in no way, shape, or form benevolent to the Southland or toward the Southern people. Since the days of the Founding Fathers, there has been virulent animosity from other regions, notably New England, toward the South and toward Southerners. At no time in the history of the United States have the New England states sent more soldiers to war on a per capita basis than during the War for Southern Independence. The opportunity to inflict their will at the point of a bayonet on the South by force of arms was just too enticing to the descendants of the Puritans. We've seen a similar scenario play out again in 1957 at Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, when the Eisenhower administration sent regular infantry troops of the U.S. Army to enforce the decree of a federal judge for school desegregation at bayonet point. Again, this was deemed constitutional, while states' rights and the rights of the Southern people to self-determination were ground into the dirt by the federal colossus. From the very founding of America, Southerners have found ourselves in fundamental disagreement with the rest of the United States on virtually every issue, be it moral, religious, social, economic, or political. Even after more than 150 years of occupation and reconstruction, we viscerally understand this, as does the rest of the USA, unceasingly reminding us of that. Despite the South contributing immensely to the national life of the United States, these basic differences in our respective worldviews are constantly evoked. We are not them, and they are not us. Let us recognize that, and let us strive towards setting our own course. This could take any of several different forms. The current USA is unsustainable. Washington, D.C. is either unwilling or unable to defend its borders, and with the massive welfare entitlement payouts, the dual loyalties, and in many cases dual citizenship of a foreign country held by dozens of senators and representatives, which results in foreign policies first and foremost serving the interests of that very foreign country. We may see balkanization in much the way the Soviet Union and its many satellite states broke up in 1991. We may see open conflict break out along the red state, blue state schism, or an urban versus rural fracture. But the idea that we can simply declare ourselves seceded, sever ties, and go our way in peace is laughable. We've already done that, and we're all aware of where that led. But political entities do not last forever, and the USA ceased being a nation long ago. The United States of America is disintegrating. Their one nation under God, indivisible, of the Pledge of Allegiance is passing away. In a few decades, that USA will be gone forever. In its place will arise a country unrecognizable to our parents. The Union, entered into freely by the separate sovereign states, is gone. What is left is but a shadow of long defiled principles and wistful memories of a way of life which was guided by those principles. The USA is now ruled by a hostile foreign element. They and their ideology are the antithesis of our historic values and the antithesis of our way of life. Our Southern values and our Southern beliefs are openly mocked in entertainment and throughout the popular culture. Our people are pawns to the oligarchs who foster endless foreign wars for the sole benefit of themselves, the mercantile class. We, the descendants of the founding stock, now hold third-rate status behind ever-demanding minority groups and third-world immigrants for whom enough is never enough. The founding documents and the principles they espouse are long dead and buried. Their lofty aims long forgotten by the sullies who infest Washington, D.C. Why, my friends, why would we wish to stay in the Critarchy, which has become the USA? We could only do better on our own, and at the very least, we would govern our own house and decide our own affairs according to our values, our morality, and our beliefs. The efforts of our noble ancestors from 1861 to 1865 are often referred to as the lost cause. The true lost cause is the very idea that the current system can be reformed. That is not possible or even desirable. Southern independence is our only hope to create a viable homeland for our progeny. If Southern independence is not achieved, the captivity, occupation, and reconstruction of the Southland by the very alien element I mentioned earlier will never be ended. And their agenda for our destruction is far from finished. They came for our flags. They came for the stone and marble of our monuments to our honored dead. They will not stop until they come for flesh, bone, and blood. The day they come for you, Southern man and Southern woman. Until we separate ourselves from this corrupted republic, our adversaries will never relent until every remnant of our Christianity, our Southland, and our Southern way of life has been eradicated completely. Self-determination is our only hope to break free from this miasma of political, social, economic, and cultural disasters which continually manifest from that former swamp on the Potomac River known as Washington, D.C. And indeed, self-determination is the only path for securing the existence of our people and a future for our children. Those who oppose us seek only one thing: our utter vanquishing and unconditional victory over us. And then, at the final destruction, all we hold dear will be on the gallows: our families, our faith, our way of life, and our very freedom. In the words of the Declaration of Arbroath, written by Scottish leaders, the Pope John XII in 1320, quote, "For as long as but 100 of us remain alive, never will we on any conditions be brought under English rule. It is in truth not for glory, nor riches, nor honors that we are fighting, but for freedom. For that alone, which no honest man gives up but with life itself." End quote. We have no choice remaining to us but to take control of our destiny as Southerners. We must institute our own system of government crafted by Southerners for the benefit of the South and the well-being of the Southern people. A highly militant, exclusionary, technocratic meritocracy built around the ideals of radical traditionalism. A society based on the preservation of our kind and our culture, even to the detriment of the others. We need a new system, a new way of governing, one which places the well-being of our people first. Something more noble than the petty mercantile aspirations of Semites. This is our destiny. Southern nationalism, led for the past 25 years by the League of the South, is the only viable instrument which will carry us to the achievement of that objective. We must each now decide our path and set our course. To continue in the status quo, polishing your shiny alpha trophies, hoping beyond hope to reform and restore the Republic of the Founding Fathers, or to set our course in the way in which our ancestors did, by striding decisively toward our survival, our prosperity, and the preservation of our way of life as who and what we are and always will be, Southerners. This is the defining issue of our time. This is the great divide, and it is the Rubicon we will cross. I implore you, Southern man and Southern woman, cross it with us. Thank you.